Hi all, how are you? How is the days going on your side? I hope it will be fine. I mean, you must be in a good health or yeah, or prosperous also. Okay. So today we are going to read a new story, The Little Lighthouse Keeper. It's also in part one and part two. So we'll read both the parts along with the moral of the story. So let's start. On a rugged coastline where towering cliffs met the endless sea stood a lonely lighthouse called Beacon Point. For over 100 years, its bright light had guided ships safely through storms, thick fog, and dangerous rocks. The lighthouse was cared for by an elderly keeper named Thomas. Every evening before sunset, he climbed the spiral staircase carrying a small can of oil. He cleaned the great glass lantern until it sparkled and lit the powerful flame that could be seen for miles. The villagers often said, as long as Beacon Point shined, no sailor will lose their way. Thomas had no children, but he was never truly alone. A curious 13-year-old girl named Emma visited him every afternoon after finishing her schoolwork. Emma loved listening to Thomas' stories about brave sailors, fierce storms, and the importance of never giving up. One evening she asked, "Why do you still climb all those stairs every day? Isn't it tiring?" Thomas smiled. "It is. Then why not let someone else do it?" The old keeper looked out across the sea. "Because somewhere tonight, someone I have never met will be depending on his life." Emma thought about those words all the way home. Weeks passed and winter arrived. Strong winds battered the cliffs, and giant waves crashed against the rocks below. One cold morning, Thomas became seriously ill. The village doctor examined him carefully. "You must stay in bed for several days," the doctor insisted. "But the lighthouse," Thomas whispered, "will find someone." The mayor asked several villagers to take over the duty. One fisherman refused. "I'm too busy repairing my boat." A merchant shook his head. "I have customers waiting." Another man said, "Surely one night without the light won't matter." Emma listened quietly from the back of the room. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. That evening, dark clouds rolled across the sea. A thick blanket of fog began covering the coastline. Thomas struggled to sit up. "The lantern," he murmured weakly. Emma gently placed a blanket over him. "I'll take care of it." Thomas looked surprised. "It's not easy, I know. You will have to climb nearly 200 steps. I can do it. And you will need to clean the glass carefully. I'll learn." The old keeper smiled faintly. "I believe you." As the first drops of rain began falling, Emma picked up the heavy oil can and started climbing the long spiral staircase. The higher she climbed, the stronger the wind became. At the very top, she pushed open the lantern room door. The glass was covered with salt from the sea air. Her hands trembled as she cleaned each panel. She carefully filled the lamp with oil. Then, just as Thomas had taught her, she struck a match. For a moment, the flame flickered uncertainly, then it burst into a warm, steady glow. The great lighthouse shone brightly across the dark ocean. Far out at sea, a cargo ship's captain looked toward the coast and smiled with relief. There is a beacon point, he said. We're safe. Emma didn't hear his words. She simply stood beside the lantern, watching its golden light cut through the fog. She had no idea that before the night was over, Lighthouse and her courage faced their greatest tests. So this was a part one of the Little Lighthouse Keeper. So we are going to read another part, the part two of the Lighthouse Keeper. The wind grew stronger as midnight approached. Rain lashed against the lighthouse windows, and thunder echoed across the sea. Towering waves crashed against the cliffs below, sending sprays of water high into the air. Emma remained beside the lantern, making sure the flame burned brightly. Just then, a tremendous gust of wind shook the lighthouse. The windows rattled. The lantern flickered. Then the flame went out. The room fell into darkness. Emma's heart pounded. Far below, she could hear the roaring sea. If the light remained out, ships sailing through the storm could crash into the hidden rocks. She remembered everything Thomas had taught her. Never panic, every problem has a solution if you stay calm. Emma quickly searched for the box of matches. It had fallen onto the floor during the storm. She found it, but every match was damp. They won't light, she whispered. For a moment, fear filled her heart. Then she noticed a small emergency lantern hanging on the wall. It still had a tiny flame. Carefully shielding it from the wind with her hands, Emma used its flame to relight the great lighthouse lantern. The brilliant beam shone across the sea once more. At that very moment, a fishing boat battling the storm spotted the familiar light. There it is, shouted the captain. Turn toward the lighthouse. The crew safely steered away from the dangerous rocks and followed the beacon into the harbor. By dawn, the storm had passed. The villagers gathered along the shore. News spread quickly that several boats had reached safely during the night because the lighthouse had continued shining. The mayor visited Thomas' cottage. We came to thank you, he said. Thomas smiled weakly. It wasn't me. He pointed toward Emma. It was our youngest lighthouse keeper. The villagers turned in surprise. You climbed the tower during the storm? A vanished fisherman asked. Emma nodded shyly. I only did what needed to be done. The old fisherman lowered his hand. I said one night without the light wouldn't matter. I was wrong. If that beacon had gone dark, my friends might never have returned. One by one, the villagers thanked Emma, but she simply smiled. The light belonged to all of us. From that day forward, the people of Beacon Point no longer took the lighthouse for granted. Each evening, someone volunteered to help Thomas carry oil, clean the windows, climb the tower. They realized that protecting was a responsibility everyone shared. As the year passed, Thomas eventually retired. Before leaving the lighthouse for the final time, he handed Emma an old brass compass that had guided him throughout his life. Inside its knit were carefully engraved words. The brightest light is the one that helps others find their way. Emma tried the compass. When she became the new lighthouse keeper, she never missed a single sunset. No matter how tired she felt, how cold the weather became, or how fierce the storms were, she climbed the winding staircase every evening. Sailors from different distant lands began calling Beacon Point the lighthouse that never failed. Many believed the lighthouse possessed magical powers, but the villagers knew its true secret. It wasn't magic, it was dedication, it was kindness. It was the quiet courage of someone willing to keep the light burning for people they might never meet. Years later, a young boy visited the lighthouse and asked Emma, "Do you ever get lonely up here?" Emma looked out over the calm sea and smiled. "Never. Why?" "Because every time the light shines, I know someone somewhere is finding their way home." The boy looked at the glowing lantern. "I would like to help someday." Emma placed the old brass compass in his hands for a moment. "Then remember this," she said gently. "A true leader doesn't shine for attention. They shine so others can safely find their path." That evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, the great lantern lit the sky once again. Ships far across the ocean changed their course toward its warm, welcoming glow. And high upon the cliffs, the little lighthouse continued doing what it had always done, lighting the way with hope one night at a time. So part two has also been completed. Now it's a moral of the story. True greatness is found in serving others. Even the smallest act of responsibility, kindness, and courage can become a guiding light that helps someone find their way through life's darkest storms. So that was a moral of the story. I hope you have enjoyed today's session, and I will be awaiting the feedback from your side. Thank you.